So hello, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you online. And before starting our today's international lecture, I would like to pay your attention to the globe sign that you can see in the lower part of the screen. The lecture will be in English, but if you want to listen to it in Ukrainian, you just choose the channel that is more preferable for you. So if you press the globe button in the lower part of the screen, you can choose either Ukrainian or English, just for your preference. And before starting the lecture, I would like to say thank you to our informational partner, Work.ua. And today we're going to speak about how to improve your ability to better cope with emotional stress. And I'm happy to introduce our today's speaker, Karen Marie Lagalund, MBA change catalyst, organizational bridge builder, and trusted advisor to C-level. Living in Ukraine since 2007 and originally from Denmark, Karen Marie brings 25 years of experience working with Eastern Europe, of which 10 years at C-level in major IT companies in Ukraine. She is an expert in organizational transformation initiatives, specializing in leadership development programs, communication and stakeholder engagement strategies, and cross-functional operational excellence processes. So, Karen Marie, we are really happy to see you with us online. And dear colleagues, if you have any questions, you can use the chat function and put all your questions into the chat box. And we will pay attention to it and answer after the lecture. So Karen Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lilia. And thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time today. This is an emotionally challenging time for all of us, and taking time out to focus on ourselves and our emotions, I think, is an important part of getting through all this together. So let me start by sharing my screen here for a second. There we go. Hopefully everyone should be able to see it now. There we go.
Yes, we see. Perfect.
Thank you much for confirming. So today we're going to talk about staying emotionally balanced. This is usually what I do is, let's say, in a professional context only. But today's lecture or webinar is going to be slightly atypical because I'm also going to be drawing on my own experience, which we have all gone through the last few weeks. So I don't want to go much into detail about who I am. Lilia already introduced me, but the things that I think could be interesting for you to know is that my first encounter with Ukraine was actually back in 1995. So when I talk about 25 years of experience, it's actually also 25 years of experience with Ukraine. It's been quite a journey during all these years, and if I look at my experience with Ukraine, I would say I have lived and worked in Odessa. I have worked for a Lviv-based company, but my actual home, or what I consider my Turanga Highway, as the Maori says, it's Kiev. And the picture that you see here on this slide is actually a picture I took on the 20th of February. I was walking around Kiev with a Danish journalist, and on that day, obviously, we commemorated the people who died during our Maidan revolution. And I was telling him about how it was back then. And it was a very emotional experience because I really do consider Kiev my home. And when we have, let's say, the necessity to look at our home as something we need to leave, that creates some very powerful emotions, and especially when we are forced to leave our home. And that is the thesis going through this lecture here today. So what is actually happening when we are forced to leave our home? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, back in 1969, seems like a lifetime ago, made a study where she was looking at how the terminally ill patients were going through, let's say, the adaptation to the fact that they were going to pass away. And this change curve is basically, I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with it already, but this change curve is showing a flow of emotions that we all go through. However, what is very important to note is that this is not a linear and predictable progression. That means we experience these emotions. However, it is not a step-by-step progress that we necessarily are going through. So if I look at my own emotions, what happened? On the 24th of February, waking up to the sirens in the early morning in Kiev, my first reaction was obviously shock. And I was very surprised because I honestly did not believe that it was going to happen. Calling me naive or not, I'm pretty sure that many shared that feeling with me. Moving into denial and decision, because on that day, I was like, I'm not going to leave Kiev. Ukraine is my home. This is where I am needed. The next day, I saw that it was still going on. I moved into, you could say, frustration. I even eventually towards the evening fell into kind of depressing mode, because on the 25th of February, I realized that I am better off if I'm leaving Kiev, but in the same process, I felt I'm doing something wrong. So that inner battle that was going on, it was a very hard battle, and I'm pretty sure that many of you can relate to this battle. Especially if you look at those of you who are in charge of big companies, if you are in charge of departments, or if you are in charge of your family and bringing them to safety. Very often, in order to take care of the people that are in your charge, you potentially will move straight to the decision phase. But the risk in that is that you forget to look into your own frustration, feeling your own depression, and also are failing potentially to look at the experimentation phase. Because of the people that you have in your charge, you have to take care of them. You are basically moving straight across. And in that process, you might actually suppress some emotions which you will need to deal with later on. I know from my perspective that I have basically been in, let's say, the valley of these emotions for quite a while, and only now starting to looking for the experiments and moving on to decision. The thing that is very important to remember is also that each and every one of us is having an individual stress response reaction. Again, I believe that many of you will be familiar with this, but to reiterate, fighting for many, if you look at how many Ukrainians are responding, not necessarily right now, but from the very beginning, and it has only been growing and growing, that we have to defend our country. At the same time, there can be many of us who are looking at, okay, I need to move away. I don't feel safe. I don't know how to, shoot a gun. I don't know how to do whatever. I just have this inner feeling that I have to run away. Others, I'm sure, have had the feeling, I've lost control. I'm frozen in the moment. It is, what do I need to do? And it's very, very hard to move out of that position, to move out of that state. The one that might be a surprise to you all is the fawn stage. And the fawn stage is where we are bending over backwards to please other people, where we are merging with wishes and needs and demands of others. It can be, let's say, a person who is sitting safely at home, let's say working, let's say an IT guy, for instance, and he feels that although he might be afraid, or he has to sign up for the forces or for the defense of his city and go out and fight, although he may or she may be actually really, really scared. But it is not, let's say, comme il faut to sit at home and work. Thankfully, if you look at the communication, both from the government and also from the business life, we all need to do the best we can, and we need to look at what are the capabilities and what are the competencies that we can contribute with in any given situation. In my case, this is doing something like I'm doing today, where sharing my experience and actually trying to give you, my audience, tools to better find your emotional balance. Also doing volunteer work. Putting me in an open fight with a gun would be a very bad idea. But it is all about what can we do with what we have available, but at the same time, acknowledge the feelings and the emotions that we have in ourselves, within ourselves. And very often in situations, we are looking at how are we communicating with others. But try to imagine how you are, or try to even look at how you are communicating with yourself. Susan David is a very well-known scholar within emotional agility, and I will refer to her later on in this webinar as well. However, if you look at these sentences, this is very much how am I communicating with another person. I'm sorry you are in pain. I can imagine what this pain feels like. You are suffering, and I will do what I can to help. But if you switch the tone of these sentences and talk to yourself, I am sorry, I am in pain. I feel sorry for myself. That is not really helpful. The second stage, I can feel my pain. That is already, I would say, a major step in the right direction, because you are getting in touch with how you are actually feeling. The third one, I am suffering, and I will do what I can to help myself. That is where you are embracing your pain, and at the same time, you're looking at it from an action perspective, almost like taking a step out of yourself and looking at yourself and seeing, this is a person that I need to help. The angle of, let's say, focusing on ourselves can be very, let's say, difficult for some people. Personally, I prefer to help others as opposed to helping myself, but that is not very helpful for me, because if I don't help myself, if I'm not in emotional balance, how can I help other people? Again, coming back to whatever position you're having in a company, with your team, with a department, with your family. If you are not in emotional balance, how can you bring the best to the rest of the people that you are in charge of, or that you are communicating with on an everyday basis? There are some very powerful feelings involved here. And one of those that I have personally encountered is the feeling of shame and guilt. There is a very distinct difference between the two. Shame is more about, I feel that I'm a bad human being. And if facing with that feeling, it doesn't give you much tools to operate with. However, if you can move it towards the feeling of guilt, that opens a whole new area. It means it makes it more easy to operate with, because the feeling of guilt, that is a burden. However, it is a burden of the feeling I have done something wrong. But if you have done something wrong, then you at the same time acknowledge I can do something to make it right. And if to look at this as a, let's say, 3-step rocket, if you really feel ashamed of being in safety, then moving that to the feeling of guilt that I have not done enough for Ukraine, for instance, that opens an opportunity for you to say, my action point is, I want to volunteer, I want to work with humanitarian aid, or do something to help my country. Following that 3-step is giving you some tools to better operate and to better bring the best version of yourself to others, while at the same time embracing the feelings that you are having inside. Because if you are not embracing those feelings inside and ignoring them, then they will stay in your mind and they will be gnawing on you for a while. So embracing those feelings is the way forward. Another important feeling to acknowledge is the feeling of grief. I believe that I can speak for all of us, that we all feel that we have lost something. And in this grieving process, we're trying to create meaning in a world which is basically senseless if we compare that with the world that we were living in. And we're trying to reconstruct a new world. Brené Brown has research, has shown, let's say, 3 distinct feelings that are encompassed in the concept of grief. The first one, loss. We have all experienced a loss of normality, regardless of who you are, what you were doing, what you are doing, and where you are right now. I am sure that every single one of us have lost something. We have lost the normality. We have lost what could be. Longing, that is this inner feeling of yearning for the opportunity to bring something back, or even just to, for one last time, being in that situation that we were before 24th of February. For me personally, it is my whole life, basically, in Kiev that I have built over the last 15 years. Every single one of you who are listening in today, you have a situation before and after 24th of February. And I'm sure that in a quiet moment, if it's possible at this stage, in a quiet moment, you will be able to acknowledge to yourself that you are somehow longing for some moments that happened before 24th of February. And acknowledging that to yourself can give you the foundation of being able to move forward. It sounds a bit like a paradox, but speaking from experience. The last one, of feeling lost, I think that is probably the most powerful of the 3, at least to me personally. That the life that we had is gone. We're trying to create sense, however it may be, in the current situation. But the anchors that we had that kept us grounded, they are no longer there. And in this situation, I know many of you may be in the Western Ukraine, many but maybe in Poland, Austria, wherever, in other places. trying to navigate a new society for those of you who are abroad, that can be quite a burden. I'm going through it myself, so again, I'm speaking from experience. And trying to create some kind of sense in this new world after having been forced to go into this situation, that is an inner struggle, which we have to acknowledge that we have this struggle. And by acknowledging it at the same time, it gives us, let's say, the basic for moving forward. And the one sentence that I would like you to take away from today, we're not done yet, but it is really, you are normal, we are normal. And whatever emotional reaction we are experiencing, it is normal. Communicating that to other people can be really difficult, especially for people who have not gone through this. The important thing is to think about, is our mind full or are we being mindful? Let me just see, there is a chat question here, potentially. Okay, you're very welcome. It's very, very important to remember that we are normal. And also at the same time, to try and find a quiet moment and try and almost step out of ourselves and look at ourselves. Is my mind full of something? Or am I able to take that 5-10 minutes where I'm being mindful of my own situation? And I think especially for those women who have had to flee with their children, there is a, for lack of a better word, a special obligation, because you are growing the new generation that will rebuild our country. And you have to be on 24/7 in order to try and protect your children. But please, if you take one thing away from today, it is you also need to think a bit about yourselves. When we are looking at whether our minds are full or we are mindful, it is important to try and think about, what do I need to focus on right now? And how can I clear my mind? I will come to some practical tools at the end, but for now, let's start with acknowledging our emotions. Let me just here. Because I have put together 3 steps, which in my experience are the steps that can most easily help you to find some kind of emotional balance so that you are able to bring the best version of yourself under the given circumstances. The first step is to acknowledge the feelings, acknowledge the emotions that you have, and put the right label on them. Because if you're able to label something, then you're also able to actually embrace these emotions. And as I was saying previously, trying by talking to yourself, almost, I would say, physically embracing yourself with self-compassion and not judging yourself. Again, you are normal. Your emotional reaction is normal. Having that self-compassion will also bring you to the state where you are able to look at the situation. What am I able to do within the next 24 hours? What do I have to do within the next week? What do I have to do, let's say, within the next 3 months? Again, it all depends on your individual situation, as long as you are telling yourself, it's okay that I'm feeling lost right now. It's okay that I'm longing for something, but what can I actually do at the moment? It's very important to, let's say, distinguish between those two. So the first step, acknowledging and labeling emotions. Let's say you are feeling anxious. Maybe that is actually because you are feeling confused about your new surroundings. Maybe it's nervousness about what has been happening. Feeling sad, maybe you're disappointed about someone's reaction. Personally, I had a situation 2 days ago where a person I thought I could share these feelings with and just talk about what has been going on and how to move forward. This person said, "I'm sorry, Karen, I'm too busy with other people." I felt very sad, but actually, as I was trying to dig a little bit deeper, I was actually disappointed because I thought that this person, of all people, would be able to relate, and it would be nice just to talk for 5-10 minutes. But I was sort of parked on the side. There were other people more important than me. So I actually felt disappointed. We can also be pessimistic about the future. If we look at how Zelensky and how our government is communicating, they are constantly trying to keep people, let's say, on the positive side. We will win this. And I really honestly believe we will. However, there can also be people who are still feeling a huge degree of pessimism or feeling pessimistic. Again, it is important to acknowledge that we are having these feelings, whatever they are. If you're feeling angry, someone may have offended you, or we are irritated. Let's say in the Western countries or NATO not closing the sky. Again, this anger, this frustration, it is okay. And we express it in a way that for every individual may be different. But again, regardless of who you are and how you express yourself, it is okay. You are normal, and it is okay to feel frustrated and angry. Feeling embarrassed. Maybe we are, as I felt personally, guilty about leaving Kiev, about leaving Ukraine. Maybe feeling lonely, that there's no one with whom I can actually share these feelings and who will actually understand to the depth of my feeling why I'm going through these processes. And feeling embarrassed can also be, let's say, there's nobody to share the situation with except those in combat zones. And I think we all agree, for those of us who are not in the combat zones right now, looking at the pictures, I'm sure you're talking to your friends and relatives, they don't need to hear our pain and our guilt and our feelings right now, because they need their emotional balance so much more, because they are still in what I will call the pressure cooker. Having acknowledged the emotions, then the next step will be to embrace yourself, basically giving yourself a hug and saying, you are normal. The first step is to acknowledge what are the resources you actually have available. And resources are 3 things. It is what external support you have available. Again, for those of us who are no longer in Ukraine, who may be looking around us, sitting, I don't know, in safety in a big city in Western Europe, or sitting with relatives, maybe in Poland, what is the external support that we have and we are able to draw on? Psychological resources. We have all a certain threshold for how much stress we can cope with and how we are responding to stress as well. Acknowledging that maybe that resource is limited at the moment. Coping strategy is also looking at what are my usual mechanisms that I'm doing that I'm relying on when I'm feeling stressed. Maybe someone likes to meditate. Maybe someone likes to go for a walk. Maybe it is knitting. It can be anything. But whatever coping strategy you applied in the past, maybe you have it now, maybe you don't. But again, if you don't have it, then the resources that you have available at the moment, they are being limited. So acknowledging to yourself, what are the coping ability resources you have available at the moment? The second step, what mechanism is activated at the moment? As I was explaining previously, sometimes we want to fight, we want to defend. Sometimes we want to flee, we want to move away. Sometimes we are frozen in the moment. Sometimes we feel we need to please people around us in order to become a fawn. But the important thing again is to look at what mechanism is activated in yourself and acknowledge, regardless of which mechanism, that it is okay. The third step, emotional agility capacity. That is, I've called it the third step here within this step of embracing emotions, because it requires an ability to be mindful about yourself, trying for 5-10 minutes, even just to begin with, to put yourself in the center and saying, I need to look at myself. I need to look at what am I feeling, and then look at what are my values? What do I feel that I need to do in order to stay true to myself? And this circle is, at best, they are all working in unison. But in total, they give you the 3 legs, so to speak, to stand on when you are embracing how you are feeling. When you have put the label on your feelings and emotions, and when you have taken a step back and looked at yourself, how do I move on? Then you have, let's say, the emotional tools to be able to look at your situation, hopefully with a little bit more fresh eyes. And then comes the third major step, which is looking at your situation and placing whatever, let's say, tasks that you have right now into the right circle. Let's say within the next 24 hours, you need to find a new place to live. I don't know, you all have, in each and every one of you, an individual situation. There are steps that are within your control that you can make happen. Those you are in control of, but at the same time, you can basically make a decision and you can make it happen. There are many tasks and many situations in our current world that we are not in control of. So the next circle is influence. So looking at your situation, again, whether it is a family, it is a department, a group, a company, what can you influence? Which, let's say, little ships can you put into motion so that you can influence whatever the situation or the task is into a more positive direction? It can be, for instance, the many that are writing on social media, that are, writing friends abroad to NATO close the skies. Again, this is just one example. We do not have control over it, but we can influence it by sending the message and repeating the message over and over. The third step is where, if we can't control it, And if we do not have any way of influencing it, then we need to adapt and accept. I cannot give you an example at this moment where to adapt and where to accept, because I'm still struggling with that myself. But I do expect that when this war is over, there will be a new world in Ukraine where we will need to adapt our old ways before 24th of February to the new world. There will be things that we need to accept, that this is what it was, but this is no longer how it is. But if we turn that, let's say, 180 degrees, then taking the best of the resilience and of all the actions that we see the Ukrainian people taking, and bringing that with us when this war is over and we are able to rebuild our country, then it is a matter of perspective. Are we adapting in a negative way? Are we accepting in a negative way? Or are we taking the best of it with us and rebuilding in a positive way? Some practical exercises and tips. And this may sound really, really basic, but at this point, I think all of us can most and best relate to something which is actually relatively simple to apply. The first one, again, it sounds very simple, but it is a breathing exercise. Having your breath under your control is actually a really, really powerful tool. And I'm not going to read this slide, there's a lot of text on it, but in all its simplicity, it is about finding a comfortable place, take a deep breath, hold your breath, and exhaling. And in that breathing process, to focus only on the breathing. Again, coming back to, are you being mindful in the moment, or is your mind full of many other things? I realized that with sirens going on, with phones ringing, with children maybe crying, with your colleagues asking for your attention, it can be very, very difficult. However, finding 5 minutes to only focus on your breathing can cleanse your brain and can give you a feeling, okay, I can move on a little bit again. Don't forget to close all the taps in your head too. And the breathing exercise can help you with that. But what can also help you is to look at how you sleep. I'm sure that many of you, just like myself, are having some strange thoughts when we go to sleep or even while we are sleeping. But some very simple tools or some very simple pieces of advice in order to improve the quality of your sleeping. And I'm sure you all know this. Don't look at your mobile phone before you go to bed. But also, if we are sensitive to light, maybe it's an eye mask. If you wake up during the night, you are doing yourself not a favor if you're checking the time or if you're checking the news. And you need to try and embrace yourself with some compassion. And sleeping, that is when our bodies, our systems are regenerating some energy so that we can wake up the next day and face the world. One or two, the two last slides, I would like to give some practical advice, which is actually if you have people still in combat zone that you are communicating with. And this is actually based on a friend of mine, Dinara Hilua, who wrote a very emotional post in Russian on Facebook, and I'm sure it was based on her own experiences. And I asked her if I could take the essence of her post and translate that into English. So these are courtesy of Dinara. And the point is that if you're talking to people still in combat zones, then we have to keep in mind that saying I love you can actually have a very, very significant impact on people. And asking how they are, it is not a substitute. When you are talking, then a calm and caring voice filled with empathy, that has so much more power and gives so much more motivation than if we are being emotional and even crying. Let me just see, there's a question here. Okay, so trying to keep calm and to give motivation to those that are still in combat zones, that is important. Sleep, just as it is important for us, it is also important for them. So if you happen to be, let's say, in Canada or in Australia or wherever, we need to be mindful of the time zone differences. And probably one of the most important ones is that there is really no need to discuss the news in detail. I am pretty sure that you, just like me, are sitting in various Telegram channels and following the news, seeing the pictures. However, those that are in the combat zones, they have their reality and they are facing every day, and they need all the strength they can get. So unless you feel it's absolutely necessary and the news are relevant to your particular individual situation, my recommendation would be not to discuss. And also asking why they are not planning to leave, that is counterproductive. We all have made a decision, and that decision can change. I myself changed that decision within 24 hours. But for those that have felt inside themselves that the right thing for them is to stay and help or work or whatever it is that they are doing, that is their choice. And the best we can do for them is to accept that choice and to back them up and try to give them some of the emotional resilience, some of the emotional balance that we have, let's say, been able to give and to provide ourselves, and pass that on to them, and thereby actually helping them keep their emotional balance as well. I would like to thank you for making time in your schedule to listen in today. And I would like to open the floor for Q&As. But I also know that this topic can be it is very personal, and it can be very difficult to ask and to talk about in an audience where you probably, best case, know one or two, but probably don't know anyone. So that's why my offer to you is that if you take your phone and you scan this QR code, you will get to my LinkedIn profile. And if you want, and if you believe that I can help you, please connect with me and we will set up a call, and I will be more than happy to talk to you and try to help you gain some sense in this situation. And I would maybe speaking English in this webinar, but I'm also fluent in Russian, and my Ukrainian has also become pretty okay. So do feel free to connect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen Marie. Thank you so much for being with us, for taking your time to share this really precious support to all of us. And I see that there are a lot of words of thank you to you Thank you for information, for support, for experience. Really, really appreciate it. And I think that the participants will use this opportunity of QR code. We will share the presentation with them, and hopefully they will join you in LinkedIn, and we'll have a separate conversation with you. Okay, thank you so much for being here. Dear participants, stay safe. We will win. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава. Take care, everyone.